Hi everyone. Can you guys all hear me okay? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay,
Yes,
okay.
we can.
Hi everyone. My name is Abigail Cho, and I am a junior studying at Taipei American School. And today I'll just be sharing about this initiative that I founded, and along with my topic today about global youth. So let me just try sharing my screen, see if it works. Can everyone see okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So today, I'll just try and keep this short. We're going to be talking about Global Youth, which is a universal project that I have co-founded and founded along with a few other students and a few other adults from our school in Taiwan. And I'll just be going over why we believe that this initiative is important and why youth in general is such an important cause and player in society today. So, seeing as there's so many people, I thought there was only going to be a few or something. So, I think we'll skip introductions because I don't think we can get to everyone's names and where you're from. But when we do move on to discussions later, then we can probably do a little bit more introduction. So, the table of contents for today is we're going to first give an overview on today's topic, which is global youth and its importance as it stands now. Then we will take a closer look into how it relates to the sustainable goals, which is 4 and 5 quality education and gender equality. And I will be giving some examples and experiences from both locally and globally that I have observed and have even participated in, and how that has created youth opportunities for people in general. Then we will move on to a quick discussion on how we can truly expand youth capabilities and do a little self reflection on what kind of solutions we can come up with and how those solutions could help in general of this whole topic of why youth education is so important. Okay, so first, I want to first discuss on why we and everyone should consider youth itself as a important factor in player. So I have two reasons that I personally came up with. One is development and the other is leadership. So first to talk about development, youth through lots of experiments and essays from social scientists in the past, we can truly understand that youth has been this backbone of all states, and they played this role of developing and creating more opportunities and different chances for society as a whole as youth begins to progress. And obviously there are many generations that come about, and the ones that I will be mainly directed to talking to today is Generation Z. So obviously this is all inclusive to all generations and opening this discussion for everyone in general, but I will be discussing on why this certain generation, Generation Z, and the youth right now are so important. So, after talking about development, we can talk about leadership and how um, leadership needs to come from youth because of the constant development in social issues and political issues that we see today, and why youth needs to continuously play an important part on being socially aware, and not only being socially aware, but also being able to combat and tackle these issues that we see. Sorry, I'm not gonna be checking chat, so I'll just so everyone knows, I won't be looking at it. Sorry, okay. Moving on, we after discussing on why youth is so important, which is development and leadership, we often still see topics and concept that are missing within this general idea of why we should be pursuing youth education as global citizens and as an international community. And three topics that I want to expand a little bit more on is the lack of inspiration and change, the neglectance of personal traits in youth today, and this general sense of carelessness in lots of youth educational institutions around different countries, especially in Asia. like since I'm Asian myself, I can kind of give a little bit more background on that. So to talk about antipathy, we really want to be directing this to how youth education is not always so considerably important to lots of people's eye and point of view, especially in different generations. We see this drastic difference in people, whether they do think people should be going to colleges or people should be dropping out and pursuing going to labor or getting jobs. And there's just a lot of different reasons and conclusions that we can draw from this. And the second one is lack of inspiration, and it's basically the idea that because of past systemic educational thoughts that has been in place in a lot of our institutions and a lot of our schools, that we begin to kind of not really pursue a change or be socially active in awareness and political issues that are happening now, but instead just following this same curriculum, and how that is detrimental to our growth as youth and as a whole. And the third is neglectance. So you can see this in not many options for, well, in most schools and lesser developed countries, we don't see many options for creativity or things that we want to do. So for example, MUN is a choice that people often get to have, and speech and debate is also something that you get to have, arts or music, but in lots of schools that isn't available. And that neglectance often plays a critical part in our society and how we are taught. And so those three things are some of the major concepts that has been like resurfacing in the recent years, and how we should be combating those issues as a whole together. And so moving on to our second point is how these two concepts that are important, development and leadership, and how what is missing plays a part in our goals 4 and 5. I will be focusing a little bit more on goal 4, which is quality education. But within quality education, we can also understand that gender equality is also quite important, and that often most people consider this gender equality as part of quality education. So to kind of define our key terms of what quality education is and what the lack of education is when there is a below average level of common knowledge about basic concepts. And this happens quite around the world, especially in Southeast Asia. And this may include basic levels in math or writing, languages, and especially global politics, which is something that has been a topic that has been discussed heavily around these recent decade with the development of social issues as it stands now. So we after understanding of goal 4, quality education, we want to really look at, so what about these goals and why do we need to care about it? So in regards to quality education, the two reasons that we should be caring about this concept as a whole is both stability and equality, which are two things that are often lacking in politics and around the world at this time in real world time. Stability coming from quality education is developing a promising future for individuals, whether that be graduating high school or even graduating secondary school, which is middle school or upper school for some people. And this general idea of finding stability and a core in your life after education, and why education plays a critical part in giving us that opportunity to be stable, whether that's economically or even mentally stable. Quality education plays a critical part and important aspect in how we view our lives and how other people view ours. And second is equality. And in both senses, quality education will bring equality to our society. And how so is by reconstructing the different social classes and different norms that we have developed as a society now, and how quality education of learning about these norms and learning about this history will combat the injustice or inequality that we face today. So, to give more examples on the lack of education and youth inclusivity, we will be talking about Southeast Asia, as mentioned before. So, these are some graphs that I pulled up, and in general, it is talking about the lack of resources and materials and how that often contributes to a lot of things, including poverty rates, which you can see on the left hand side. It is dated from 2013, but even through in recent years of research, we often don't see quite a difference or such a huge drastic development that we consider that a huge step towards quality education, which is why I believe, or most of us believe, that this graph still stands pretty true. And the right side, it is separated in four different categories, and there is a bar. Oh, that is hidden. Oh, my apologies, but it is just a general spectrum of from being accessible to not being accessible. So I'll just leave this on for a few seconds so you can just look at it. Okay. Moving on, from in Southeast Asia, let's talk about the struggles and problems that we should confront, or some of the problems and issues that we see, but maybe are not able to tackle yet. So I picked six categories, which are more of the larger categories. One is funding, general talking about not having enough funds to even start schools or even having the enough adequate resources for teaching and learning. The second is training. Even if we did have schools or institutions that are available to us, we often don't have enough available teachers, or even if the teachers that are present are often undertrained and not competent for the roles of teaching other kids. And the third is classroom, where oftentimes in a lot of places there are legal restrictions to where you can build educational institutions and systems, and why there's a lack of space in general, like geographically. And the fourth is materials, as mentioned above. Even with fundings, oftentimes there's not enough for the amount of students are that do not have accessible education. So what it's really simple things such as pencils, pens, paper, books, or blackboards, and etc. The fifth is exclusion, which generally talks about how lesser developed educational systems are not able to provide for kids with special needs. That includes disabilities, and even if they were to be able to provide education for students, they're not able to provide education for everyone and every student that does want to learn or is placed into these institutions. And the sixth is more broad and general, which is about this constant risk of students or to be students that are in countries where quite unstable and always at risk of conflict, and how that plays a big part in whether these educational institutions will prevail or and will be sustainable in the future. Seeing as we talked about some struggles, it is only fair we talk about, on the other hand, some examples of working organizations and working people and how they have contributed to quality education as a whole. So first is Organization for Youth Education Development. They have many sectors in around the globe. One prominent one is in Germany. They have done a lot of great things for youth education as a whole, including building schools, building classrooms, funding for resources, and training teachers from other countries moving in to lesser developed ones and teaching the kids there for a short-term period, for like not a long term, so which also poses as a problem. The second one is PIE, which is this general sense of supporting a network of educational advocacy, which is awareness or talking about it. And also, just like the ones mentioned before, also increasing the fundings we have and doing fundraisers for it. And the third one is School Fund, which targets adults hoping to get a post-secondary education. And this is quite important because though it is not directed to youth, adults who want more education also play an important part in society now. And even if the education comes late, they still are able to get more information and more knowledge and more common skills that it does eventually contribute to like both economic purposes or getting more job opportunities or even becoming more teachers for the youth, like said before. And the fourth is KIPP, which is one of the most important ones. Well, you can't really define it, but it is quite important because it actually does legal work to establish classrooms for educational needs. And these four often work, well, a lot of organizations work together for the same root cause, which is the lack of education in this case. But these four are quite prominent ones that have had a lot of progress throughout the years, and especially in Southeast Asia. And if you're interested, you can like look online for a little bit more information on this. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by a chat. Okay. And moreover, let's talk about people who have contributed just as much as these organizations. First, we're going to talk about Malala. Malala, obviously, everyone knows she is a very, very, very important character that has raised awareness in girls' education and education as a whole for youth. And she is quite a historical figure. I think everyone probably knows of her, but she is one example of how she believes in youth education and how her belief as a whole has contributed a lot to the lack of education in areas where it is not accessible. The second is Leroy Phillips. He advocated for educational needs for kids with disabilities, which, as we mentioned above, is often excluded and not included in the context of the lack of education. And he has provided a lot of opportunities for kids with different disabilities and also establishing a few schools along with other organizations in hopes to build a better foundation for these kids in general. And the third is Greta Thunberg. She got quite popular over the years to talk about climate change and envir- like a lot of social issues regarding the environment and a lot of changes. She is quite young also, and just like the other two people, she has also played an important part of voicing out youth opinion on causes and thus kind of contributing to the sense of why youth is still so important regardless of what is happening in real world today. And the fourth is arguably quite important is you and I, because you and I are examples of people who advocate for better education. And even if you don't, I think being able to have education already checks your privilege in being able to go to school or being able to get help, being able to learn, having teachers. Those things are all that contribute to why youth is so important. And I would say you wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be here if it weren't for quality education that we are able to, experience. And we're gonna play a quick video that reiterates why youth is so important. Let me see if it. Can you hear? Because I'm not too sure how to. Can you hear?
Oh, just make sure would you end your share screen option and then share again with your audio shared as well? So I think when you share your screen, there is an option to share your audio.
Sorry, let me try. Let me see. Should I reshare? Is that
Yes,
okay?
yeah, reshare. So if you stop your sharing right now and then share
Mhm.
again. So if you press on share screen on the
Oh,
left
okay.
bottom corner.
Thank you. Okay, this should work, hopefully. that, can you hear?
I don't think so.
Oh, we can't hear?
I can't hear.
It's a bit difficult, sorry guys. Okay, can you guys just read the subtitles? Is that okay? Or is that okay if we just read the subtitles, or let's read the
Actually, I think we
subtitles?
can make it work. Is your computer's audio on?
Yeah.
Oh, that's weird. It's supposed to work if you press share audio.
It says you are sharing your computer audio. You try
Oh,
again,
that's
maybe
really
like
weird.
you hear.
No, I don't think so. I guess we can just
Okay, I
look at
shall
the
try one more
subtitles.
time.
Okay, thanks.
Let me try one more time. Can we still not hear?
No.
Okay, well,
Oh,
can we just can we just read the subtitles? Is that okay? And I'll give the link to admin, and maybe you can post it. And if people want to actually hear the audio, which
yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
okay, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna play this again because I was talking over it. Sorry guys. Okay.
Abigail, you're muted. All right,
Yeah, I'm not sure I could really hear.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, perfect.
I'm sorry. Okay. So in that video, it kind of just talks about how youth and people now are playing such a critical part in our society, in our community now, and why it is important to have for the need of this continuous flow of ideas and people that contribute to issues that we are trying to tackle today. Moving on to, oh, sorry. There's this one. Okay. Ooh. So to moving on to more logistics and statistics to help you and I better understand the great impact of these people and you and I is that the number 264 million, when I read this number personally, I was quite shocked by the amount of kids that have no access to quality education. This is a really, really big number. And to think that there are kids around the world who can't go to school even if they wanted to, they can't learn even if they wanted to, is quite horrendous. And it is something that we should always be considerate of and looking into, because it reminds us of our privilege and of what we have today, and compared to all the kids that don't have this certain concept, which is education, that not anyone can just experience as a whole. Okay, to go to a little short discussion. I have some guiding questions here, but because we're talking about youth education, I thought it was important to have different opinions and wavelengths of ideas on this issue as a whole. So if anyone is willing to answer these questions either by chat or if can they open their cameras and audios?
Yeah, I think we can do that. So if you want to
Okay,
answer the questions, you can just raise your hand. If you press on the yes button, go to participants and press on the yes button, we will call on you.
Right. I can start first. So if you guys are thinking about what you want to answer. So I think for the third question, what are everyday things we should take note of? It isn't actually very hard to contribute to the idea of the need for education. Like I said before, and what I still think now is checking our privilege. That is something that is important in what we need to understand. And obviously, privilege is relative, meaning that everyone can have a different sense of or a different level of privilege that they feel or opportunities that they feel they are given. And but even so, you should always be reminded that there are people who want what you have, and there are people who don't complain of what they don't have. And those are some things that we should always be reminding ourselves. And that contributes to the idea of youth education, because we want to be educating ourselves in what is happening around the world now and how we can protect this youth leadership and the idea of the need for learning and knowledge. And that oftentimes comes from little ideas of ourselves and how we can contribute as a whole.
Yeah, so if anyone would like to answer one of these questions, just click yes or raise your hand so we can call on you. So Henry from USA, would you like to unmute yourself and answer one of the questions?
Yeah, hello, I'm Henry from the USA. So my personal experiences have been that I've lived in Germany for 12 years and I came to the USA in 2017. And the way I experience education, I've obviously have been in more developed countries, and the education there is always very, well developed, and we have well-paid teachers. But one thing I like to point out is that many countries have cultural xenophobia, which means that they don't respect students such as me, who is Persian from Asia and the Middle East. And there's xenophobia against people like me, especially in Germany, where I would get discriminated against and bullied just for my ethnicity. But yet I still understand that I get a quality education, but throughout my time in Germany, I never wanted to learn because I was always discouraged and told that I was dumber than everyone else. But here in the USA, everyone is foreign, everyone is, from many different countries. So there's lots of, a lot more inclusiveness and, working together and collaborativeness. And so I thought that this style of education where you accept where people come from and embrace those differences, and then work together as groups or with the teacher to improve education.
Thank you, Henry. That was a very good point, and thank you for sharing your personal experiences. I definitely do agree that culture often and always plays a critical part in education and politics even today. And I personally don't have a solution for that, because I don't think I am knowledgeable enough to say anything on this topic as a whole. But I do agree that having an educational system where we are taught to be more accepting and inclusive to all people of where they're from or how they identify, or breaking social norms is a very important topic that should be discussed.
Great. So Aman from India, I think you just raised your hand. Do you have anything to say? Feel free to unmute yourself. Aman from India. Okay, I'll get back to you later. How about Sandali from Sri Lanka? Would you like to say something?
Yeah, I'm from Sri Lanka, and in our country, we have free education from like the very primary age and so like secondary school and university levels. So I don't really experience, like paying for education and such things because like government schools and government universities they're free of charge. So I guess that we have so like I believe that this should be enacted within like the whole world because it actually really helps the children with economical difficulties and so those kind of stuff. So I believe that it's a like a really good point because like for example in countries like um, permission from like all the African countries and like most of the African countries, we know that it's obvious that like they face war and all those things. So like amidst those kind of situations, it's really hard to like for their parents to even like even if they have money to like set their children off to school. So I believe that having free education in a country is really important. So like that's my personal experience. Yeah.
Thank you, Sandali. You bring up a really good point, like I said before. In your point about free education or the different levels of universities, or I mean, different levels of like segments. I'm not too sure if I've got that correct, but I think that's an interesting point, and you're right on that should be provided around the globe. I think that's still a prominent issue that most people are still working towards, and the question of free education and how that could be practical and how that could be feasible. So yeah, really good point.
Yes. So Zaria of India.
Uh, so, hello. In my country, it's a law that everyone should get an education till the eighth grade. But I've seen that a lot of people aren't completely aware that they have a right to education in our country. And because of this, they don't have an education, they don't get an education because they are not aware of of the fact that they can go to a school and get an education. So people should be made aware of their rights and the fact that they can get an education, because the unawareness of many people also contributes to the lack of education in youth.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you're also absolutely right. And the adequate right to information around different parts of the world, and especially ones where people are more restricted to what they can know, is important. And I believe there are organizations that work towards giving students and people what like their right to information and their right to what they can attend, like going to school or not. So yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like we have two more people. Nishta from India.
Uh, I would also like to raise some like a similar kind of a point that my previous Indian friend raised, that being a nation, being an Indian, I've heard being largest democracy and flag bearer of human rights. We have like many laws that are being enforced to actually implement to actually come to actually educate people and educate children to remove poverty, and even international forums creating are being involved in creating agencies that help developing nations like ours to provide quality education to children. But when I step out of my house, move a little out of the city towards the villages or even the city slum area, you would see like slums are being slogged with people, with children, like about 10 people living in a small hutment, and they do not even have adequate food or clothing. They don't even know that is education even necessary, or what is so being important to be educated. They are just in need of getting 2 square meals a day, or they just want to wear good clothes. And what is the matter? What is the point of having such laws, giving millions and billions of budget towards this cause, raising awareness on such platforms where uh, I, being an educated person, don't even have this power, or government running such a great democracy, such a great demographic and a democratic power cannot provide a basic human need of even awareing people about the need of education, what even education is. And you encounter such people, you just need to step out of your house. So I cannot find a reason or find a reasonable solution, because I do not have the power to enact it, and those who have power, like they have been exercising power, enacting laws, and of course showing that they have tried to implement, but I do not see a change, and I do not know how could I enforce it, or how could I contribute to it. So that's a big question, because know-how is quite uncertain, and um, it's quite scary when you just encounter such kind of incidents or such kind of people.
Thank you, Nishta, for bringing up your point about what you see and how what you believe about this issue. And you're right on that. I don't think anyone can truly tell you or all of us what to feel and what to believe in, especially where you are seeing no progressive change and no progressive results from the people you are supposed to put faith in to enact policies and better laws for all of us. So you have a really valid point. And I think your question on that you don't think we can provide an adequate change is also quite valid in a sense that, what we can do is very restricted, seeing that I think most of us are students, or even if we're um, adults or more, most of these power comes from governmenting officials. So I think, in a sense, that you recognizing the problem is already quite a big step and different from people who do not recognize the problem. And I think that is already one step towards recognizing this issue as a whole.
Oh, that's great. So Abigail, I think we have to move on to Q&A really soon. So
Yep.
do you have anything more to say, like for your
Um,
presentation part?
no, my presentation is just a summary and Q&A slide, so it's fine.
Okay, perfect. So I'll just direct you the first few questions and see how many we can get through. So, okay, let me find the first question. Sorry for that. Okay, so the first question comes from Harry in the USA. Question on how do you suggest poorer or less developed countries fund education, and how do you think you can convince them to do that?
Thanks, Henry, for the great question. In a sense, I also do believe that lesser developed countries or poor countries don't have the adequate resources and funding to do so. And that is why I also believe NGOs and even IGOs play a part in creating fundings or even creating international recognition for the problem in that stated country. And I I also don't think if a country doesn't believe in youth education and why education is so important, like someone mentioned previously, I'm so sorry, but it's the culture plays a big part in this issue, and not all the time can we convince countries who do not want to be convinced of what they do. So all we can do is provide external resources that go into the country, but maybe not systematically into the government or officialized places. And but the act of being able to provide and curating those resources that we can provide is already quite important as itself.
Thank you very much. So our next question comes from Sandali in Sri Lanka. The question is, in some universities of certain countries, there are violence, for example, rags and certain impact on freshmen. What's your opinion regarding quality education and these types of situations?
I don't really know what rags are, but in regards to, I'll just talk about violence as a whole. I think,
Should
yeah,
I
sorry.
explain?
Yeah, of course.
So basically, the senior students, they they like exercise violence, like show their power and those kind of thing, so that there's actually most of them actually like leave some universities because of that impact. And I believe that like even if the situations, like it's a bad effect and that. So
Is that
Sure, I think her connection wasn't really well, but I think she meant that there are senior students who usually bully their underclassmen. I think that's just the overall
okay.
way.
Okay. Thank you for your question and participation once again. I think to generally talk about violence, again, violence mostly stems from culture, and especially in more rural areas where there is a lack of development, we often still see this power dynamic between different grade levels. And I think that is an issue that is still persistent in not just places with lesser developed educational systems, that is actually quite prevalent in what we see today. So I don't think that is necessarily part of how we can combat quality education, but maybe that comes to play in policy enacting and establishing different regulations in between schools and even states as a whole. If that answers your question, sorry.
Thank you. So our next question comes from Nishta of India. The question is, being an Asian, I could relate to a common indicator of weak language skills, which is reflected through incorrect spelling, etc. But this could be due to growing emphasis on English as a global language. How about elevating regional languages, which would build a more inclusive culture? But how is it still a big question?
Okay, thank you for your question. Once again, I think I relate to you in a sense that English was not the easiest thing for me to learn, and though it has become more natural for me over time, I understand your point of view on why we should develop local languages, and I do think that is same equal of importance as learning English or any other foreign language. I For your last part of this is still a big question, I think is the general sense that even learning local languages, there are still a lot of other factors such as math or other curriculum differences we see globally, and maybe that's why you believe or we believe that there's a lack in learning the local language or learning local culture. And I don't say this in means of trying to downplay what you have said. It is important, but I think it's just there is a different level of significance of how people view this problem as a whole. So I agree with you on that we should learn more about our local languages or even our mother tongues.
Thank you. So our next question comes from Maria from Spain. She asked, I think the idea to create free public universities should be a chance to active quality education in order to distribute education and knowledge to everyone. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
guessing it's more of a statement. Do you like agree, or what your thoughts are on free universities?
I think we kind of like glossed over this a little bit just before, but yeah, free public universities and education is important, and it is a great concept that I think many people agree with, but it's what goes behind and where will the funding come from, even from countries who do believe in this cause. There isn't necessarily this huge incentivizing reason for countries to provide an extreme amount of funding for local universities for people to attend. So I think it is a great idea and I am totally for it. But speaking in a sense of the state, I can also understand why not many people, not many states or officials are willing to do so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can take 2 more questions. So another one coming from Henry. How can we bring education to countries that are currently at war?
I think that is a very important question. Like we talked about a little bit ago, quality education is in risk in places of conflict and instability. So I don't think in that sense, when we're seriously looking at places where they could go to war or evolve in conflict, it isn't much about quality education, but it is about creating a safer place and safer institution for students to go to. And it becomes less of a problem of what we teach, but what we can provide and how we provide that in places, in local places of war. And I think that question is difficult to answer in the sense that you're never sure of the politics in a state and you're never sure of what could happen or what could influence whatever could happen. And so you bring up a really good point, and I don't think I'm knowledgeable enough to answer fully of your question, but I think it is so important in placing education into places of risk.
Thank you. So unfortunately, we can only take one more question, which comes from Rubani from India. His question was, I will specifically talk about India, but I guess it relates. Although providing quality education is a human right, but even educated people are turning education as a business. Government has also kind of supported this because even if we have the resources, quality education is still not imparted. What can we do as educated youth to educate others to put a stop to this huge trade monopoly of education?
So I would first like to praise everyone who has talked about recognizing and acknowledging the problem of their country or wherever they live, because that is already a big step in showing that you are a educated person that cares about other educated people or uneducated people. And that step to being aware and being checking yourself and reminding yourself is already quite important. And in a sense, unfortunately, I don't know as much about Indian politics and how education slash business circulates around there. So I think I will answer this in the sense that education, I think as citizens and as people who are noticing this as a problem, what we can do is, calling out the things that you or exposing the parts of your government or whatever the issue is and getting bigger international recognition on a problem, because that is what creates more of a movement and more of a acknowledgement of the problem, and especially that can also create more fundings or create more support of whatever you need or whatever you see is the problem. So it's just the sake of the sake of transparency and the need for it in India, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So unfortunately, we have to call this an end. I definitely don't want to take up the time of the next session. So I also dropped Abigail's social media accounts and an email. So if you have any more questions there, just definitely contact her. And I believe that's it for the session. Thank you everyone for coming today.
Thank
This is the
you.
first session. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day or evening
Thank
wherever
you.
you are.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But
Excuse me, can I ask one quick question?
I'm sorry, we have to go. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Ray, can you end the
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you, Mr. Cody.